You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. A victory, but not a triumph. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wins a third term, but falls short of securing the majority in Parliament he so wanted. Diplomacy already underway at the UN General Assembly, that's getting underway shortly, and coronavirus and climate change will dominate the agenda. Evacuation efforts are stepped up as lava from this erupting volcano is still threatening more homes on the island of La Palma. In Sudan, state television announces there has been a failed coup attempt. In the next half hour, we'll be live in New York, La Palma, Nairobi and Brussels. Hello, and we start with breaking news here in the UK. A third suspect was today accused of involvement in the 2018 poisonings with Novichok nerve agent in Salisbury and Amesbury. 3 people were left critically ill from the nerve agent, and a 44-year-old woman died 4 months later after spraying herself with Novichok contained in a perfume bottle. Following the story for us is our security correspondent Gordon Carrera with all the details. What do we know about this third man, Gordon? Karine, thank you so much for joining us with that from Brussels. Karine Kanimba joining us there. Let's take you very briefly back to La Palma because we are watching the volcano as it continues to be very active today. It's been 50 years since it last erupted. There's been a huge evacuation taking place on the island, and as you can see, there's more smoke and lava filling the air today. See you soon for the headlines. You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. The diplomacy is already underway. Leaders from around the world are gathering for the UN General Assembly. Coronavirus and climate change likely to dominate the agenda.
And I'm Laura Trevelyan at the United Nations, where President Biden speaks today in the shadow of that chaotic US withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wins a third term but falls short of securing the majority in Parliament he so desperately wanted. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan speaks exclusively to the BBC about whether he'll recognise Afghanistan's Taliban government.
All the neighbours will get together and we will see how they progress, and then whether to recognise them or not will be a collective decision.
Evacuation efforts are stepped up. You can still see the volcano erupting, threatening more homes on the island of La Palma. In the next half hour, we'll be live in New York, Montreal, Nairobi and La Palma. The world's diplomatic community is descending on New York for the annual UN General Assembly this week. COVID restrictions forcing some leaders to attend virtually for a second year. Top of the agenda will be those major global challenges: ending the pandemic, vaccine access, and the challenge of climate change. And the very first sighting of Wally, who has now become something of a cult hero for very good reasons. That was back in Ireland in March. Pleased to see him doing so well. I wish we could put a GoPro on Wally and see what he's been up to. We'll be back live at UN headquarters in New York shortly. Stay with us. You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. The diplomacy is already underway. Leaders from around the world gathering for the UN General Assembly debate. Coronavirus and climate change likely to dominate the agenda.
And I'm Laura Trevelyan at the United Nations, where President Biden speaks today in the shadow of that chaotic US withdrawal from Afghanistan.
It's not just the politicians and diplomats in town, though. These South Korean stars arrived to offer some millennial magic. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wins a third term but falls short of securing the majority in Parliament he so desperately wanted. We head to Italy for a tale of two babies swapped at birth whose parents chose to become one extended family. And we're keeping an eye on the volcano in La Palma. It's continuing to rage. Evacuation efforts have been stepped up as the lava threatens more homes. It is getting ever closer, that lava, to the sea. In the next half hour, we'll be live in New York and Sicily. Leaders from around the world are meeting in New York for the general debate of the UN General Assembly. It was almost entirely virtual last year because of the pandemic. This time, though, many leaders will deliver in-person speeches, including Joe Biden, who will make his first address to the world body since he took office. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. It's the universal values, though, of love and family, I think, that many people have appreciated about that movie. You've been live with Lucy Hockings. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All the latest results, headlines and analysis. Sport today on BBC World News.
You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. A game changer on climate change from China or an easy win? Campaigners welcome a pledge by President Xi to stop building new coal-fired power stations abroad, but what about those at home? We'll bring you live reaction from a climate think tank on this new pledge from China.
Oh my God!
As a powerful earthquake strikes southeastern Australia, we talked to this Melbourne man whose virtual meeting was shaken to a halt. 12 months in the French port of Calais trying to cross the English Channel to seek asylum, we follow one would-be migrant. And look at the lava flowing from an erupting volcano on the Spanish island of La Palma. It is engulfing more homes as it heads for the sea, where it could trigger explosions and toxic gases. In the next half hour, we'll be live in New York, Melbourne, Kiev and La Palma. The US climate envoy John Kerry has said he's delighted about a promise from China to stop building new coal-fired power stations abroad. Mr. Kerry has been lobbying China to act and said it was an important decision to tackle global warming. A lovely way to end the programme. Thanks for being with us. I've got the headlines coming up. You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. Joe Biden sets the world a hugely ambitious target on coronavirus vaccines. The president is pushing world leaders to get 70% of their population vaccinated by this time next year. But is he setting them an impossible task? On another big issue, the UN has already had some success getting China to pledge to stop building coal-fired power stations abroad. We'll hear from Shanghai about how much difference this will make. Powerful earthquake strikes southeastern Australia. We'll hear from this Melbourne man who was in a virtual meeting when his entire flat began shaking. 12 months in the French port of Calais trying to cross the channel to seek asylum. We follow one would-be migrant's journey towards the UK. And lava from a volcano on the Spanish island of La Palma engulfs more homes as it heads for the sea. It could trigger explosions and toxic gases. In the next half hour, we'll bring you the latest from New York and be live in Nairobi, Japan and La Palma. margins of the UN General Assembly, President Biden will announce today that the US will donate an additional 500 million COVID vaccines to the rest of the world, bringing its total commitment to 1.1 billion doses. He's hosting a COVID summit where he'll put world leaders under pressure to address vaccine inequality. The Roald Dahl estate offers a huge global opportunity for Netflix. His books have been translated into 63 languages and sold more than 300 million copies. See you again in a few minutes.
BBC experts check the facts behind the stories making the headlines. Go to the BBC News website and app to answer any questions you have about the big stories of the day. Reality Check. Get the facts straight.
You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. Joe Biden sets the world a hugely ambitious target on coronavirus vaccines. The president is pushing world leaders to get 70% of their population vaccinated by this time next year. But is he setting them an impossible task? China pledges to stop building coal-fired power stations abroad, but stops short of including its Belt and Road Initiative. 12 months in the French port of Calais trying to cross the channel to seek asylum will follow one man's journey towards the UK. Former President Jacob Zuma fails to appear at his corruption trial for a second day. We'll be live in Johannesburg with the latest. And just 5 years ago, this dancer took his first ballet lessons. Now he has just graduated from a prestigious dance school in London. In the next half hour, we'll bring you the very latest from New York on the UN Climate Change and COVID Vaccine Summit, and we'll also be live in Johannesburg. In New York, President Biden is to announce that the US will donate an additional 500 million COVID vaccines to the rest of the world, bringing its total commitment to 1.1 billion doses. The suit accuses them of plotting to obtain sensitive documents motivated by a personal vendetta. In response, Mary Trump described her estranged uncle as a loser. Mr. Trump's organization is under investigation in New York for financial wrongdoing, which it denies. Good to have you with us. Hope you can join me again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Travel?
You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. We need to take radical action on climate change. Global leaders also need to adopt an adult approach to global warming. Boris Johnson's message to the United Nations.
We must show that we are capable of learning and maturing and finally taking responsibility for the destruction we are inflicting. It's time for humanity to grow up.
Lava streams down the La Palma volcano in the Canaries for a fifth day, incinerating everything in its path. Heading for the US, 19,000 mainly Haitian migrants stranded in a Colombian town near the border with Panama. A custody dispute over a 6-year-old boy who was the lone survivor of a cable car crash in Italy comes before the family court in Israel. One size fits all, EU leaders' plans for standardised mobile, tablet and headphone charger plugs. In the next half hour, we'll have the latest from New York, and La Palma will be live in Tel Aviv. It's time for humanity to grow up and take responsibility for climate change. That was Boris Johnson's message to the UN General Assembly as he gave his speech. With 40 days to go until the UK hosts a summit on climate change, the British Prime Minister called on leaders to sign up for big reductions in their carbon emissions. We have it covered for you, though, as Katia mentioned. We will be bringing you live results and analysis in our German elections news special, taking place on Sunday. Katia and the team, Ros Atkins as well in Berlin. Ros will have guests from 15:30 GMT as Germans vote to decide who is going to succeed Chancellor Merkel. Lots to look forward to on Sunday. Don't forget you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Lucy Hockings BBC, and I'll see you for the headlines in a few minutes. Bye-bye. You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. Tens of millions of Americans are in line to get a third dose of the coronavirus vaccine. The elderly and frontline workers could get their booster shot soon, but what about their children? With cases among young people surging to nearly 250,000 a week, we'll talk live to a specialist paediatrician. Take an adult approach to tackling global warming. That's Boris Johnson's message to world leaders at the UN.
And I'm Ros Atkins, live with you from Berlin as Germany's election campaign enters the final straight.
These are live pictures of the erupting volcano in the Canary Islands. Lava has been incinerating everything in its path for a fifth day. In the next half hour, we'll be live in Philadelphia, Berlin, La Palma and Washington, D.C. Vulnerable Americans and those over the age of 65 are one step closer to receiving a COVID-19 booster shot. It's after the US Food and Drug Administration gave the go-ahead after weeks of internal wrangling. Final approval, though, must come for the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention. But while some adults will soon likely receive their third dose, many children haven't even had one. Now, that is despite cases in young people surging thanks to the highly contagious Delta variant. Last week, nearly 226,000 children in the US were diagnosed with the virus. Do stay with us. Plenty more to come. We'll take you live to La Palma as well, keeping a close eye on the volcano. And we'll be talking also about climate change. So stay with us here on BBC World News. You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News. Tens of millions of Americans are in line to get a third dose of the coronavirus vaccine. The elderly and frontline workers could get their booster shot soon. But what about their children? With cases among young people surging to nearly 250,000 a week, a paediatrician tells us it would be better to deliver first doses to the unvaccinated.
If we want to get on top of this pandemic, I don't think that the way to do that is to give a third dose to people who are already vaccinated. I think the only way to do that is to vaccinate the unvaccinated.
With 2021 shaping up to be one of Australia's hottest years on record, we'll look at how they're coping with extreme heat and wildfires. Heading for the US, 19,000 mainly Haitian migrants stranded in a Colombian town near the border with Panama. And fears of a toxic cloud of gas as the La Palma volcano is spewing more ash and dust into the sky. These are live pictures right now from the Canary Islands. In the next half hour, we will be live in Washington and take you live to Tenerife as well. Vulnerable Americans and those over the age of 65 are one step closer to receiving a COVID-19 booster shot. It's after the US Food and Drug Administration gave the go-ahead after weeks of internal wrangling. Final approval must come from the CDC, but while some adults will likely soon receive their third dose, many children haven't even had one, and that's despite kids now making up a quarter of all cases at the moment. And very briefly, one final story to bring you from Syria. Displaced children there because of the war have created this banner on which they have written messages and drawn pictures of their hopes and dreams. The roll of paper that spans 75 metres has been touring displacement camps across the north of the country, displayed to mark the International Day of Peace. Thanks so much for being with us. See you again soon. You've been live with Lucy Hockings.